All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving into the incredible story of an empire built on, well, potatoes and a whole lot of persistence. We're talking about a brand that went head to head with global giants, all from a tiny little shed. And it's all because the founder figured out this one simple but super powerful secret about what you and I, the customers, actually want. I mean, look at this. It's a journey that's almost hard to believe, right? On one hand, you've got a kid on a bicycle getting rejected by shopkeeper after shopkeeper, and on the other, the head of a 5,000 crore rupee empire. You know, we hear these rags to riches stories all the time, but the real question, the one we're going to unpack, is how? Seriously, how did Chandubhai Virani take all that rejection and failure and build one of India's most loved brands, starting with absolutely nothing?
So, to really get this story, we've got to go back to the beginning. And believe me, it doesn't start with success. It starts with some serious hardship in a tiny village in Gujarat.
Okay, so picture this. Chandubhai was born back in 1957 in a village that didn't even have electricity. I mean, from day one, his life was just a constant struggle. But the real turning point, the moment everything changed, was in 1972. A massive drought just completely destroyed his family's farm. His father, was basically no other options, had to sell their land, everything they had, for 20,000 rupees. He gave that money to his sons and pretty much said, go start a new life. So, Chandubhai, who's only 17 at this point, takes his share of the money and heads to the city of Rajkot. He tries to start his first business, a fertilizer venture, and it was a complete disaster. He got scammed by a supplier, lost every single rupee of his family's investment, and was just left there, stranded with absolutely nothing. But you know how these stories go. Right when he's at his absolute lowest, a small, almost random opportunity comes along. And this little glimmer of hope, it's about to spark the idea that changes his entire life. He was desperate, so he took whatever work he could get at the local movie theater, the Astron Cinema. I mean, he did everything, putting up posters, checking tickets, sweeping the floors, even patching up torn seats. And for all that work, he was making just 90 rupees a month. 90! But that hard work, that hustle, it didn't go unnoticed. The owner of the cinema saw how dedicated he was and was super impressed. So impressed, in fact, that he offered Chandubhai the contract to run the whole canteen. This was it. This was his first real chance to run a business his way. Now, here's where things get interesting. He wasn't just slinging snacks, he was paying close attention. He was basically studying his customers. And pretty quickly he saw this crazy pattern emerge. One single item, just plain old potato wafers, was making up a whopping 80% of his total sales. 80%! So great, right? He found his golden goose, his best-selling product. But there was a huge problem. His suppliers were just terrible, totally unreliable. They'd show up late or not bring enough, and he'd run out of wafers right during the movie intermission, the busiest time. He was losing money left and right, sale after sale. And that frustration, that constant problem with the suppliers, well, that became the big turning point. Because in 1982, facing this huge challenge, Chandubhai makes a decision that would literally become the foundation for everything that followed. He basically said, you know what? If you want something done right, you've got to do it yourself. So he decided he was going to make the wafers himself. He was inspired by a Hanuman temple right near the cinema, and he named his little venture Balaji Wafers. And with a 10,000 rupee investment, he got started in a small shed right at his house. Now, he didn't have much money, so he had to get creative. He was incredibly resourceful. He couldn't afford proper machines, so you know what he did? He bought a bunch of parts and just built his own peeling and cutting machine for only 5,000 rupees. His house literally turned into a mini factory, with the entire family pitching in to keep costs down. And this right here, this is the absolute core of his whole business philosophy. He learned it directly from watching his customers in the canteen. He realized that people didn't care about flashy packaging or big TV commercials. They cared about one thing, and one thing only: getting good value for their money. So what did he do? He built his entire brand around that one idea. While all his competitors were selling these standard-size packets, Balaji Wafers give you 25 to 30% more chips. It was such a simple, genius strategy. Just give people more of what they love, for a great price. All right, so the brand is a huge local success, but now comes the next level, going from a home kitchen to a full-blown factory.
And this was his biggest and honestly most terrifying challenge yet. To make that leap, he had to take a massive risk. I'm talking a 50 lakh rupee loan to build their very first semi-automatic plant. This was a real bet the company moment. If this went wrong, it was game over. Bankruptcy. And then, of course, just when things are on the line, disaster strikes. The company they hired to build the plant just went out of business, right in the middle of the job. So all that money was gone, and all they had to show for it was a useless, half-built pile of machinery. I mean, this is where most people would just give up, but not them. This is where their sheer resilience just shines through. Instead of throwing in the towel, Chandubhai and his brothers just rolled up their sleeves. They took every single machine apart, piece by piece, figuring out how it all worked through pure trial and error. And then they rebuilt the entire plant themselves. They literally had to become engineers on the fly to save their company. It's incredible. So, with their factory finally up and running, a factory they literally built with their own hands, Balaji was finally ready to take on the big guys, the giants of the snack world. And they came out swinging with this absolutely genius marketing slogan. It was so simple, so direct, and it went right after the biggest weakness of their #1 competitor, Lay's. You know how everyone jokes about buying a bag of air when you buy Lay's? Well, Balaji took that exact joke and made it their weapon. And the growth was just explosive. By 2006, they had captured an insane 90% of the market in their home state of Gujarat. 90%. But their empire wasn't just about sales numbers. It was about a totally unique culture. Can you imagine working at a company with no sales targets, where every single employee has the owner's personal cell phone number? Get this, they even helped out their competitor, Haldiram's, after their factory had a fire by making their products for them. I mean, who does that? This was just a completely different way of doing business. Well, all of that success, that total market dominance, it definitely got noticed. And not just by anyone. We're talking about the very top. In 2023, PepsiCo, the company that owns their biggest rival, Lay's, came calling. And they came with a massive offer. 4,000 crore rupees to buy Balaji Wafers. But then, in a move that just completely shocked the entire business world, Chandubhai Virani, the kid from the village with no electricity, said no. He turned it all down. He rejected the offer. And that leaves us with one last, really interesting question to think about. By turning down that money, by choosing to stay an independent Indian brand, he makes all of us ask, what's the real value of a company? Maybe, just maybe, some things, like your legacy, your principles, and the promise you made to your very first customers, are worth more than any amount of money.